Thanks everybody for joining our discussion on Southern California commercial real estate hiring trends. I'm Carly Glova, and I'm the president of Building Careers, and I'm joined here by my colleague, Julia Turpit. And Building Careers is a commercial real estate focused executive search and recruiting firm. We are based in San Diego and serve Southern California markets. And we primarily work with investors, developers, and owner-operators to ensure that they have the right people on their team to be successful. I grew up in commercial real estate finance, starting as a consultant, working on the private equity side, and most recently, prior to this, was with Biomed Realty here in San Diego. And I started the company almost 6 years ago and have the pleasure of connecting clients and candidates in an industry that I know and love, in commercial real estate. So we've had a large number of people reach out to us inquiring about the hiring landscape, and we wanted to create a forum for that. So our goal is to make this more of a discussion and share our insights and learn from yours as well. So feel free to jump in, use the chat box, unmute yourself and ask questions if something we said resonates with you or doesn't resonate with you, and you have a different opinion. Would love to hear that. And I will let Julia kick it off and talk through some observations. And again, we're happy to take questions and comments as we go. So Julia, please take it away.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. Looking forward to chatting with you all today and hearing some of what you've been seeing in the market these last crazy few months. I have had the pleasure of working with Carly and Building Careers for 5 years now. My background is combined in recruiting and in commercial real estate, specifically on the marketing and business development side. So I'm just going to jump right in and bring us back to March when everything hit. Obviously, none of us really saw this coming. It was kind of out of left field in a crazy time for everyone. So we initially saw every company that we work with put hiring on pause. I think, those first couple of months during the shutdown and lockdown, everybody's working at home. There's no human interaction. Hiring is pretty much impossible. And everyone wanted to see how this was going to play out. So a lot of kind of waiting game those first couple of months. And then we saw things open back up as we headed into the spring, later in the spring, and saw kind of that first wave of hiring take off. And here we are now at the end of summer. Historically, summer is slow for hiring in general. That's something we've seen year over year with individuals in and out of the office for summer vacations. And despite this being a very strange summer, I think it was no exception. A lot of folks trying to get out of their house and go on road trips, unplug a little bit. So we saw kind of our usual summer lull. But as we head into the end of the year, companies are putting together their budgets and plans for 2021 and their forecasts, and we've seen an uptick again with hiring trends.
Right, and I think something to note too is that we had expected to see a lot more layoffs and haven't, which we take as a positive sign. And the layoffs that did happen were more one-offs of folks that were perhaps no longer in alignment with what the company's needs were. If they had to restructure because of this, it was one or two folks from a company. We didn't see many massive, 30% of the workforce, 50% of the workforce for that particular company experience layoffs. So again, think that's a pretty positive sign, and haven't seen layoffs many more layoffs 6 months later. So again, that's something else to note.
Yeah. Jumping into where we have seen hiring, it's been pretty heavy on the property management side. So property management at some point was deemed an essential business during all of this. And obviously dealing with tenants is something that isn't going to go away. It didn't go away, obviously, during COVID. It was actually pretty rampant. So there was a lot for property managers to be working on, and companies looking at additional property management support. We've had a couple of open positions, retail, office, so a few different, as of late, property management positions that are back open too. Analysts are also always in high demand. That's something we usually have at least one analyst position or analytical position at a varying level open at any given time. And there was no exception during COVID. But one of the things that was unique was we saw companies being more open to entry-level analytical folks. So individuals coming right out of undergrad with internship, basically experience under their belt. And I think, the reason for that is kind of twofold. One, they had a little bit more time to invest in these individuals, to help them, to train them, to teach them their processes and procedures. And obviously companies are focused on overhead right now as well, and limiting overhead costs, and to hire a junior entry-level analyst is going to be more affordable than to hire somebody with 5 years of experience. So we actually got to place 2 or 3 2020 grads during COVID, and that was pretty rewarding to help those individuals find their first jobs out of college. So
yeah, and I think, and Julia, didn't necessarily touch on asset management, but I do want to talk about that because I got a lot of questions on the asset management front. Why aren't there more people hiring for asset management? Since now companies need to be able to figure out what to do with these assets, are they hiring there? And, really on the asset strategy side, since we had been in such a long economic growth cycle, since the 2008 recession, I don't think it seemed as far removed from how the companies were currently thinking. That was still in the back of their mind. So they had really been beefing up their asset management teams for the past few years. And the asset management teams are really in pretty good shape this go around. So, we haven't seen as much hiring there, as I think companies were pretty set up to weather a storm. They didn't know how the storm would come, but to be able to prepare their assets to operate based on different business strategies, depending on what happened. And I want to take a break for a second. Are there any questions or comments on the hiring roller coaster of types of jobs out there that we can touch on right now? Okay, again, if you have any questions, feel free to jump in or chat in the box over to the right. And so we'll touch a little bit on markets and project types. We've also recently seen a surge in the life science development needs, and largely actually for companies freshly entering this space and looking to attract talent and properties, frankly, from the life science veterans. So these companies are looking for pedigreed experts to start up or grow their divisions on both the development and acquisitions fronts. So where there historically were 3 major players in the life science space, even in the past week, we've learned of 3 other ones sort of popping up and looking to invest in the life science markets, but San Diego obviously being one of them, want people with boots on the ground in San Diego. And multifamily, I guess, is another thing to touch on, but that seems to be struggling in California, as even local companies are looking outside our markets for returns. I just had a company this week who is based in San Diego tell me that they want to bring on national multifamily acquisitions expertise in really any other market than San Diego, and in California in general, because that's not where they want to be investing. So that's pretty interesting. But other asset types that are seeing spikes include land, obviously agriculture being deemed as an essential business, industrial, obviously very, very important right now, and even some interesting cap rate compression on things on big box stores like Home Depots. And again, as I previously mentioned, the life science sector is spiking, and definitely a good sector to be in to weather a pandemic.
Definitely. So Carly mentioned, a few of the sectors that are experiencing significant growth through this COVID situation. I think across the board, the majority of companies, however, aren't hiring necessarily due to growth or adding to their teams due to growth. It's more for replacement purposes or additional analytical support, like I mentioned, or very niche specific construction and development projects. One of the pluses that's kind of come out of this that we've seen, though, is companies, working from home, there's my dog, But companies being more open to individuals who can wear multiple hats, where before they may have siloed individuals into, different buckets within the company and not wanted to hire somebody who had dabbled in a few different areas because they thought maybe they weren't, seasoned enough in one particular sector. But now it's, let's hire the jack of all trades who can come in, wear different hats, add value to different departments, which I think is terrific in giving those people opportunities and companies kind of thinking outside the box of plugging and playing one individual in a couple of different areas. So, for example, a company may have hired an analyst to solely support acquisitions. And now that individual may be supporting 3 different teams. They may be supporting asset management, acquisitions, and financial reporting. So that's been a positive that's come out of this in terms of hiring trends. Another positive that we've seen, and something that probably isn't too surprising to everybody as we see the way our world is changing, but a focus on both sides on personality and culture. Companies are finally realizing and putting just as much emphasis on personality and culture as they are on skill. They realize that they need to find the right person for their team, just a close second to technical capabilities. We had a client we were working with during COVID, and their barometer for hiring someone was, does this person walk in and do we say F yeah? And if we don't say that, then it's a no. And on the flip side, on the candidate side, a number of surveys are revealing that culture is now the most important thing that candidates are looking for in a company. It's trumping compensation, benefits, et cetera. That is what an individual is looking for when they're making that career jump and move.
And I think culture, obviously from a company perspective, but the culture of where you're living too really plays into it, because one of the most interesting things that we have seen, and we've had so many candidates reach out to us looking to relocate to San Diego. So you have folks with institutional level, big city, not that San Diego is not a big city, but big city talent looking to enjoy the sunshine lifestyle out here. And I was on a call with one of BizNow's writers about 2 weeks ago, and she asked, is there anything that's changed that significantly impacted your business and how you do business? When I was thinking about it, I said, yes, actually, all of these folks wanting to move to San Diego is making us think about different ways to get in front of companies and present these folks that are very, very qualified, but may have normally been out of the price range or at a different level than what companies can use. So it's figuring out how to present those candidates to companies here in San Diego, which has historically been more of a casual, local handshake type of town, not as much, New York style, head down and work. And so companies had historically been hesitant to bring folks from outside in and relocate folks here. So that's changed the way that we've done business a lot, which sort of brings me to my next point. If you do know anyone looking, again, we're a free resource and we'll talk to anybody and everyone. And, if we can't directly match them with a job on our radar, we'll try to, point them in the right direction as much as possible or connect them with other resources that we have. Also, a no cost resource for companies unless they ultimately hire someone from us. So we're happy to send comparable candidates to and let, your companies have open conversations with these great candidates that we have. I know some of them are here on our call. So, would love to hear from you folks there. If you want to introduce yourself or have anything to add and share to the group, we're interested in hearing that as well.
I could jump in there. Hey, Carly. Hey, Julia.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Thanks, Julia, for tuning up my resume not too long ago. So you both know my story, but I'll share for the rest of the group that I just graduated from the MBA program at Cal State San Marcos last month. And interesting to hear the story of bringing in people from outside of the area. I transplanted down here to San Diego maybe a little over 2 years ago from San Jose. Probably a little more tense, a little more population dense area, and had a little bit of a government appraisal background and trying to find my first analyst position now. So still on the hunt.
No, and Ken's a great example. We've been, working with him and reaching out to different folks and presenting his background for different kinds of opportunities, which, Ken actually came up with one of these ideas on his own, was more of a project-based position type internship for his degree. And so I think the consulting side too, I know a lot more companies are going to be moving that way. And, again, Ken will have you help you, permanently land somewhere that you're excited about here, hopefully. And I like that you were able to let us think outside the box too. So thanks for sharing.
Of course, thanks for all the help that you've both given me so far.
I'll just introduce myself. Carly, it's good to see you. Julie Gibson. I'm in Portland, Oregon. I get your newsletters, and I was just gonna sit in the back and listen to get an update on what the hiring trends were.
Julie deals with hiring and placing folks right out of their grad program all the time. Would love to hear what you're seeing up in Portland, and folks are going elsewhere too.
Yeah, we're a much smaller market, so it's always challenging just because we're a smaller market, but I think it just depends on the sector you're in, certainly, right? Retail and hospitality are just pummeled, and so nothing there. But I've in talking with my advisory board, who are kind of leading employers in our region, they are. The developers actually seem to be continuing to move forward with their projects. So it's not all terrible. I wouldn't say they're. I have also seen students and alums who some alums have been furloughed, who had recently been placed in the last year, kind of first in, first out. So I'm trying to help them get placed, and there are some jobs in the last couple months. I would say there's been more jobs coming online, whereas, from the first 4 months of the pandemic was nothing. So I think we're starting to see some things come back. What I have heard from them is that there's a lot more applicants for jobs, because I think some, people, you've got everyone graduating for entry level, you've got folks who've been furloughed and not as many positions. So it's kind of a supply and demand issue. But I guess I'm encouraged to see a few more jobs coming online. And I think moving forward, it'll be interesting to see, what the office market does in terms of coming back to work. And, there's different thoughts on that and how much square footage is needed, and really, is there going to be much growth in that area? That's one of the big variables as well. Industrial obviously is probably doing best out of all the sectors. They continue to expand, at least here in our region, with Amazon and others, warehouse space being high demand. So yeah, challenging for sure, but not completely dead. I do think, a couple of our board members, though, have hired our students to do some market analysis on, I think in a time like this, in a recession and down markets, there's always people who are looking for the opportunity, right? And so on the positive side, I think there will be some opportunities, and for those firms that have the cash and the resources, equity to move on those, there might be some jobs tied to those as well.
And I'm going to turn this into a Grill Julie session, but have you seen any pay for those entry-level positions or more research help, entry-level analysts? Have you seen that change at all?
I have not seen any change to it. I've only seen a couple recent figures, and they were right in there. They were the same as what our typical graduates are getting from our master's program. Yeah, so not yet.
Yeah, that's what we've seen as well. And we have, I mentioned before, life science obviously is booming, and San Diego is a big life science hub. And we've had a couple new players come in wanting to hire in San Diego, but also Denver, Boston, sort of across the board.
Mm-hmm.
And what they said to me is they don't hire based on market specific, I guess, geographic market specifics. It's for the job. So it's, they're looking for a director of development for life science, and that's, they, pay the same thing across the board no matter where they live, which I haven't heard that very much, but I'm interested to see if, with everybody working from remotely more or working from different locations, if that starts to be more the norm too.
Yeah, I think there might be some nice opportunities for people who don't want to move, that perhaps firms will be more flexible certainly in regard to coming into the office, but maybe even consider hiring out of market, realizing that, this online platform can work for certain jobs. So it will be interesting to see moving forward if there are more opportunities to work remotely for firms, which obviously for job seekers can be a plus if you don't have to, are not one of those people that has to go in the office. The opportunities might be more plentiful.
Yeah, and actually, it just made me think of something else too. I had a conversation with the COO of a retail investor out here maybe 2 weeks ago, and he was asking me about technology and what I've seen change. And I don't know if this is different in different markets, but the commercial real estate industry, especially here in San Diego, is very archaic. The processes, the technology used, everything is, commercial real estate seems to be a very slow adapter to things like that.
Yep.
And, he asked me to name companies that are on the forefront of technology. And I there were one or two in LA that stood out in my mind that I mentioned to him, but I think this is a pretty good wake up call for the commercial real estate industry. And perhaps that creates opportunities on the tech side and the efficiency side.
Totally.
So
totally think you hit a point that is interesting. I really think coming out of this, and we just had our annual conference a couple of weeks ago and brought in some speakers from like MIT's Real Estate Innovation Lab, and it was all around tech and real estate. And their comments were that the pandemic has totally accelerated technologies that were in place and being used a little bit, but it's just finally the adoption of them being out of necessity has happened. And I think with that, there's going to be some new jobs that we can't even envision, like in the next 5-10 years around data science and analytics, that I think for those who have that bent can get creative and even coming up with their own, like really being able to identify how you can be an asset in the data analysis world to a firm that they might not even be able to see. I think it's definitely reached a tipping point, or maybe caused by the pandemic, for firms to be able to use technologies in so many different ways, and everything from, a lot's going to be focused immediately around building safety and how do you get employees back into the office and monitoring their health and safety and making sure that they're comfortable coming back. But that can translate into the, figuring out the best utilization of space. And then of course, just so many technologies in the operational world as well, from just operating firms and property management. It'll be interesting to see.
Did they mention any names of software? Do you remember any off the top of your head, names of software or companies that are on the forefront of this that might be good to, look into and see if we can bring them to our cities?
Someone asked that, and the speaker was hesitant to name any names. So I think there's got to be some, like Fifth Wall out of California has got to have some, in the venture VC real estate prop tech world, there's got to be some emerging technologies. The CRE Tech group probably has some articles about those, but I don't know of any.
And I think that's a great skill set to have, just on the data, data finance and technological side for anything. I mean, that translates to the technology side, obviously, analysts, asset management. Everybody wants somebody that has a basis in understanding technology and analytics. And I think that's almost that goes hand in hand with somebody being detail oriented, and companies want somebody that can function that way. So I think across the board, that's a huge skill set for, the candidates listening and folks listening here too to focus on. I mean, it's good to practice and try to get up to speed with, and I know some of that's just how you're wired. But if you have any inkling of being wired that way and having an analytical mindset, I think showcasing that, in your resume and conversations goes a long way.
Yeah. It's a skill set I think not a lot of people, I don't want to say have, but in the real estate world, you just don't see it, right? So there's a really great opportunity to get some new talent in that regard for the firms that are open to it.
Good time to be brushing up on all skill sets, actually, and any certifications that are out there, that maybe you've been putting off, or just a good time to look into continuing education in all forms and fashions during this period too. So, does anyone else have any questions or?
Thanks for putting this together. I'm sorry that I jumped in a little bit late. I was trying to finish something up here. It was quite distracting for whoever has the dog. We got a new puppy, and it's been quite a handful. It's not quite continuing education, but it is something we have time to deal with during the COVID downturn and being at home. But in regards to some of the questions regarding different markets, San Diego has always been known as a rather slow transaction market, especially for multifamily. Have you heard of any other markets that are seeing, I've heard there's been other markets, specifically the red states, that are seeing, a lot of capital coming from California and kind of being pushed to those other markets as a result of continued legislation, looking like it's going to be more restrictive for landlords to increase rents or to evict tenants as a result of non-payment. Have you seen any other markets with companies who are booking forward their business plan saying, hey, 2021 is starting, we want to displace X amount of dollars within core plus assets, so much in value add, and what states and if there's been any conversation regarding what that looks like as far as opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're a little bit biased being on the West Coast because most of the companies, at least the ones that we work with, are historically West Coast focused. And it's funny because they'll talk about being West Coast focused and Texas always falls into that market. But Texas is kind of surprisingly still huge. Texas is one of the first markets out of anybody's mouth. So Texas, and actually the company that I mentioned when I was speaking that said they wanted to invest anywhere but California, Nevada, Utah, Texas were some of their top markets that we've heard about. And I know more East Coast based companies would have probably a different focus, but I think based on the nature of where our companies are, those are some of the markets that they've been kicking around.
Yeah, it definitely makes a lot of sense for new acquisitions versus existing.
Another market that this is not database, this is more my observation. We toured with some students and developers, Salt Lake City area in Utah. And that I was amazed at the growth out there in tech firms and even growth south of the city and north of the city into Farmington. This was probably 18 months, 2 years ago, but and I don't know recently, but that was another city that really was emerging with a lot of jobs, new jobs, and population growth.
And Max, have you seen or heard anything differently than those markets? I'm interested in your.
My question in regards to that, it was really specific to like companies you networked with directly who have said, 2021, we want to put this much money out. It's been rather, within several of those other markets, you're correct. Texas gets thrown into every market just because of its size. There's so much different little pockets, even depending on who you ask. They've described, Austin as a, tech bubble or not, or, Houston, how much has been affected by the oil industry, and Dallas is, still known as like the place that's growing the most in that market. But, San Diego for multi, they saw, I think it was 13 deals with 100 units in 2019. I think in 2020, they're going to see 8. Phoenix for 2019 saw 165 transactions above 100 units. And those are the issues that I think a lot of owners are looking at. And, I would love to talk to you about this offline. I followed you so long on LinkedIn. So I'm really happy to be, on this call and, connecting. But I've just heard so many companies who actually are booking dollar amounts that they want in these other markets. And the methods by which they're choosing the other markets is something that's a little more of interest, because some people, they might just say, oh, red states, but on the back end of what data they're using to decide, or how they're deciding how much they want to allocate, and in the result, how many positions they want to hire for those markets, are things I'm always trying to pay attention to. I wish I had better knowledge, but I would defer to the expert.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you caught on to whenever I spoke about the more hiring at a national level. So, locally based companies saying, hey, we don't necessarily care where they are. We are based here, but if they have expertise in the Southeast, great, we'll bring them on. So I think it's probably a product of the pandemic, because they might have had come into the office here in San Diego and then fly wherever they're looking to their markets every week. So I think it's a product of that, but also a product of really the markets that they're focusing on. We've seen that a little bit on the acquisitions front, but outside of that, companies still are maintaining their teams, and they're still here, and they're not, planning on moving anywhere else for the time being. I think that's largely focused on the acquisition side. Hiring too is based on the election. I've had, a lot of people ask me when I really think it's going to ramp up, and I think there's so much uncertainty that at least when there's some certainty, regardless of what that is, after the election, I think that'll ramp up hiring a lot on that side. After
the delay with holidays and all of that too, right? And the typical delays that you see. And then the pandemic, we'll see. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if, once there's a vaccine, what employment trends and employers do, if they are just, there's so many people that have hiring freezes, right? And so they're managing with the talent they have. Some of their talent's leaving. They're not able to hire to replace that talent. And so it's possible, I guess, that there's pent up demand, right? I'm just thinking out loud. I don't know. But I think of just Portland State has a hiring freeze, and we've lost some people recently to other universities. And so when that's lifted, there should be some nice opportunities. And I would think that some of that would resonate with some firms as well that are just, operating on a really thin staff right now. If they have a freeze. Have you heard too much about firms, freezing their employment? Graystar here is an example. Like, as soon as the pandemic hit, they stopped hiring, and they're in management. That business doesn't really go away.
We heard a decent amount of jobs specifically being on hold, but I guess another positive was that companies said, we need this role, just not right now. So the word freeze, we've heard from maybe one or two companies, so I don't think there is mandated on complete stop. I think we've actually seen most companies still being able to hire folks at some level, obviously much more limited and not as many people. But as far as hiring freezes, we haven't seen a ton with the clients that we work with.
That's good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here. And I know that most of you have been following us for a while. So if you would think of anything offline, questions later, or just want to connect with us and network, we're happy to continue the conversation and connect with you or anyone, in your network who you think we could be a resource for. I know Ken mentioned resumes earlier too. That's something that we work on also. So if we can be of any help there, just feel free to email us or give us a call, and looking forward to continuing the conversation with you all.
Thanks, everybody.